Brian, welcome to Good Movie Monday. We are absolutely thrilled to be chatting with you because Mel and we actually met because of our mutual love for Silent Night, Deadly Night
Oh, you're
5.
kidding me.
No.
All because of you.
Oh, that's wonderful. You guys, that makes my heart sing. That's
Well,
incredible.
in fact, I think it was earlier this year, Mel was hosting a screening of Brian Yuzna's Society, and then
Yeah.
about 10 o'clock at night, I get a text message saying, "It's Pino." Like, she recognized you in the film because that's where that's where our history begins. So, yeah, we are
Oh, that's
chuffed.
incredible, you guys. Wow. And I'm glad you're in society, Mel. I'm really happy to hear that's really come into the consciousness here in the last couple of years. And it's fun to make a movie, so many years ago, and suddenly it starts getting this resurgence. And people start seeing it. So thank you for showing it. I appreciate
Definitely.
that.
Well, and that I must say, in the 10 years that the society has been running, that
Yeah.
like the ending of society has been the biggest reaction that we've had in the crowd. Like everybody, I actually was taking some secret photos of people because people's jaws were dropping and just like
That's
it was
great.
raucous. Like people were just like, "Oh my god!"
That is
It
amazing. I
was
would love to
amazing.
see that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Every show needs to.
everybody loves a
Yeah.
good shunting, and that's the thing,
Oh
right?
God. Don't we
How can
all?
you not?
we
How
had
can you not?
we had Brian Usner on the show earlier this year, and
Oh
he
yeah.
all he wanted to talk about was shunting. It was hilarious.
That's
I
funny.
sing
He's a
about it.
wonderful
We talk
guy.
about
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so funny. Oh, I'd love to see Brian again. We keep our names keep crossing in different circles because we just released Silent Night 5 uh, as a compilation, and they interviewed me for the behind the scenes, and I got to talk a lot about Brian. And last year, I did a show, one of the horror cons, and the people that interviewed me actually had a quote from him about me that was the nicest thing in the world. And I really do love him. I really
Yeah.
do. And we've kept in touch kind of sporadically, but I'd love to work with him again or just see him again. He's the sweetest guy. You never believe all that stuff comes out of his head. But
Yeah.
you interviewed him, so
Yeah,
he's really funny.
he
And,
gave us
yeah.
2 hours of his best. It was fantastic. He even
Oh,
sang
that's
us. He
wonderful.
even made up songs about shunting. So
Oh my God.
all these years later, it's still in his head. But for the benefit of our
Yeah.
listeners, you've got quite a fantastic body of work. But those first movies were particularly amazing for horror fans. You had Pumpkinhead, you had Society, Spontaneous Combustion, and of course, Silent Night, Deadly Night 5. I want to know, how did you get into acting and how did you find yourself a staple amongst these cultish horror films?
Well, isn't that funny? You never know when you're making a movie what's going to become of it, especially these movies, because Pumpkinhead, especially, we made it, I think, in '89. It came out in the theaters in Los Angeles and a few cities for about 2 weeks, and then they pulled it. De Laurentiis Group went bankrupt. MGM bought it, put it on the shelf, and there it sat. And years later, HBO started running it, which is really funny because I did a TV series recently called Rectify, and one of the one of the executives from the Sundance Channel came up to me at the wrap party and he goes, "Oh, you're the kid from Pumpkinhead. Yeah, I worked at HBO when we started airing that one." I'm like, "Oh my God, it's thank you, thank you." Because then it had this life. And then Sci-Fi Channel picked it up. It's so weird what a small world it is.
Yep.
Sci-Fi Channel picked it up and started running it. And that's really when it got popular. So that movie didn't even get popular for 10 years. So it's funny when you're making them, you're just thinking, well, it's a job and a wonderful creative job. These were some of the best movies best experiences I ever had. But anyway, to answer your question, I started acting in high school, like a lot of us do. I found my tribe in the drama club, and I actually started winning awards. And that was the first time I'd ever won an award for anything. And I got a scholarship to Pepperdine University out in California, full ride. And at first, I was going to go to the University of South Carolina because that's where we were living, and you could go for free. And my dad was like, "Well, that's where you're going. That's where you're going." And then I got a scholarship to Pepperdine, and that was a full free ride. He's like, "Well, that's where you're going, son." So I did, and that got me to Los Angeles. And so I'd been acting in high school, and then I started acting in college, and actually did one of the first plays I did, A Talent Agent Saw. It was the receptionist at a talent agency, and she came up to me after the play, and she said, "I'm going to get you into them to see the Gage Group. I'm going to get you in to see the agents." I'm like, "Oh." So they signed me, and then I started working in Los Angeles in film and TV while I was going to school. And I worked it out so that I could, work extra hard, pay off my scholarship and still do the movies. And Pumpkinhead was not my first on-camera job, but it was my first feature. And I remember that audition very, very well. I auditioned for casting director Billy DeMotta, and then I ended up going to see Stan Winston for a callback. And I'll never forget this because it was in Van Nuys or some little strip mall on the second floor. And I went up to audition, and Stan was there, and a lot of the cast was there because they'd already been cast. And the callback scene was the scene in the church where Bunt tells them the whole thing. Like, this is what happens when a man does a man wrong, and it can conjure up a demon in another man's name and all this. And we're in this little office building in Reseda, and I'm standing like next to a door like this. And we're doing the scene. And all of a sudden, on the other side of the wall, somebody goes, "You scared the shit out of me. You did the best callback of my life." And I got the movie. And then later that night, or the other, a couple of days later, I was watching the Oscars, because this was around the time the Oscars were being presented, and Stan Winston walks across the stage to collect his best Oscar for the Queen Alien in Alien.
Yeah.
And I had no idea who he was at the time. Because remember, I'm like 22 years old. I don't know anything. So I called my mom right away. She was back here in South Carolina. I said, Mom, that's the guy. That's the guy. I'm doing a movie with that guy right there. So that's how I got started. And then I did a lot of film and TV in LA and worked pretty consistently. And I don't know how I kind of fell into the niche of these movies that all hit the cult nerve. But after Pumpkinhead, I auditioned and got Society. And I remember Brian Yuzna telling me, like 3 weeks into shooting, he's like, I'm sitting on the couch waiting to do our scene. And I think this was close to when we were doing the shunning scene. And he walks up behind me on the couch. He goes, "So you're the kid from Pumpkinhead, huh?" Like he didn't even know. Yeah. So I got that part but he knew Pumpkinhead was cool. And then he was really responsible for Silent Night 5 because he executive produced Silent Night 5. And he had me in, and I think he really pushed for me to do that role. So I owe him a lot. And then, Spontaneous Combustion with Toby Hooper. I mean, that was just an amazing experience. And I did know who Toby was. Of course, by this point, I knew who all these people were. And I was a big horror fan, too. I had a kid come up to the last show I did, and he's like, "Oh, man, I grew up watching your movies. We used to smoke joints in the basement and watch all your movies." I'm like, "You're Twisted Walt Disney." But I'm like, "No. I did too, like not necessarily smoking the joints, but
sure.
Yeah, but I grew up watching Texas Chainsaw. Yeah, Anyway, so it's a thrill for me that these movies have become what they've become, and I really can't believe it. I'm humbled and just stunned that people even know them and want to talk about them, and so.
Well, let's talk about Silent Night 5 because, definitely my favorite Christmas horror film of all time. I watch it every year. I talk about it on the show, probably more than I should. But what I want to know is like the actual franchise itself is pretty clunky. It's all over the shop.
Oh, yeah.
And it's amazing that part 1 and part 5 are the best installments in the franchise by far.
Well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that.
So I'm wondering how do you react to being offered part 5 in a franchise that until that point had been quite messy? Is it an easy yes, or do you have to think about that?
It's a very easy yes when your agent calls and says you got the job. Yes, It is. It's a very easy yes. Remember, I was a starving actor. And actually, Lance Henriksen said this once, and I think this is absolutely true. I mean, he really impacted me a great deal. He said, "You always honor the work. That's your job as an actor. You honor the work. I mean, you have parameters, right? Now, like there are things you won't do or things that you will do that someone else won't do or vice versa. But when it comes to the work, you honor the work." I did not go into that script or into that audition at all thinking, "Oh my God, what is this? This is ridiculous. This is silly." I went in saying, I'm going to play this inhuman character. I get to play this non-human character, and not just a non-human character, but he's the killer, and not just a killer, but he's hurt and he needs something. I mean, I salivated over it. I remember preparing for the audition because nothing was a given with any of my, it never was. It never is. I'm still very much a working actor, and I audition all the time, and I get turned down for a lot more than I book. But that's the actor's life.
Yep.
So nothing's ever a given. But I remember my friend had a house in Mandeville Canyon in Los Angeles, and I took a broomstick and I put it down my back and through my blue jean pants so that I could get that kind of stiffness, and then tried to walk as naturally as possible. And that's kind of how I prepared for the audition. That I didn't take the broom into the audition, but I got the physicality down.
Yeah.
And I wrote this whole story of Pino. I actually, it's the first time as an actor, because in Pumpkinhead, Bunt came very naturally to me. I grew up in the Southern United States. I grew up in North Carolina. I know the folklore, and I have the natural Southern accent when I put it on. And I just felt like I really got into that character. But playing Pino was so much fun because it was a non-human character. And I mean, there's nothing more amazing that was sympathetic. Well,
yeah.
I found
yeah,
right?
Definitely.
So I remember journaling, and I would sit on the set and journal. I would sit there and stay in character and just like write a diary in between takes, like the whole time, like as this creature that just wanted love and just like wanted to be accepted and wanted to be like the real children. So
well, one of my favorite.
I took it very seriously. Yeah.
Sorry, one of my favorite scenes. No, you're right. One of my favorite scenes in the movie is just when you're alone in the house, and what comes to be your old house, and you've got the feet tapping at the end of the bed, and you're looking through all the things. And there's something I must admit, I didn't know what the twist was, and I didn't know until it was revealed. Yeah,
good.
And I actually screened the film last December for Christmas for the Horror Society, and there was a mix of people whether they picked up on it or not. And I was wondering how much focus was there on how much you play it up, or are you trying to keep it under wraps? Did you just presume that everybody would pick up on it, or what was
No, I think I remember that day shooting that scene that you're talking about. I loved that day. I loved getting to walk around the house alone and looking into the Christmas ornament and like looking at himself and like all of this kind of self-discovery, basically pretending he was Derek. That's kind of how he was approaching that. Like, this is his life. And it's funny. Now, my memory could be foggy, but I don't know that we ever really discussed how much to give away and how not. Yeah. I think I played him very real and very sympathetic. Yeah. And I certainly wasn't talking like until the end.
Yeah.
Of course. So I think they just kind of thought what I did, because I prepared to do it that way. I think they just thought, okay, this is working. And so I don't remember everyone saying play it more, play it less, because then there's that big change at the end when obviously he's starting to start going bonkers.
Well, I think that the genre itself is the cloak that sort of hides it, because characters can be weird and people just assume that they're just weird eccentrics,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's really true.
Is it safe to say that Pino is your favorite character that you've played? Like, you're welcome to say no, but just because we're talking
definitely
about it.
One of. Oh, definitely one of. I mean, it was the most fun I had as an actor. I really loved playing Bunt in Pumpkinhead. I also loved playing the bookstore owner in Rectify. This is a TV show I did a couple years ago for Ray McKinnon. That was another character, Chet, that I just felt like I knew.
Yeah.
And I felt like I knew the scene, and the scene was so well written. Like, the writing was so good on that show that you could just say the words and the words did the work. And I remember even the casting director telling me, you're not what Ray had in mind for this character at all. It's based on someone he knows, and he envisions something much different than you. But I am telling him, she said to me, I'm telling him you're the guy. And he let me be the guy. So that was very rewarding and a lot of fun. But I would say it's a toss up between Bunt and Pumpkinhead and Pino, only because Pumpkinhead was my first movie. Stan it was just an amazing experience, and we were on location, so we were out like on location the whole time, so we really bonded. But as an actor, someone asked me this. Someone actually asked me at a panel I did a couple of months ago what my favorite role I'd ever played was, and Pino was the first thing that came out of my mouth. Yeah. So I got to say Pino. Yeah.
It's magic.
And I love that people love him. This is, in the last couple of years, this is all new to me. Yeah. People have sent me stuff over the years, like, will you sign this? Will you do that? But I had no idea. There was so much love for the movie. I had no idea. And same. I knew Pumpkinhead was out there, and a lot of people loved it. but I just had no ideas. So it just thrills me beyond belief.
Yeah,
That-
And
and
as
these,
you said, like he's a very sympathetic character. Like you really feel for him, and like all the like the family themes in the movie. It's really quite heartbreaking.
Well, thank you. It is, yeah. And that's how I felt about it when I did it. So, I mean, I think from a fun point of view, it was definitely my favorite character to play. Because again, you get to play this non-human. I mean, that's very rare. It's very rare that any actor gets to play a monster or a non-human sympathetic murderer. What can I say?
Yeah. And I think fans probably latch on to Pumpkinhead and Silent Night more than others because it's festive and you only reserve it for that one time of the year. You know,
I think so.
It's like the Christmas tree. You dust it off and bring it out, you know, that one time only. And sort of that's how I look at it.
Yeah, that's how I look at myself too, Glenn. I just dust myself up and bring myself out once a year. That's what it's getting to be.
A little bit of this question would be the elephant in the room as far as Silent Night, Deadly Night, and horror fans are concerned. But let's talk about Mickey Rooney here because famously he protested the original film like it was a big deal at the time, and yet a few years later he pops up as like essentially the lead in Part 5. Yeah, that was a real head scratcher. Was there much buzz around that on the set? Were people talking and sort of speculating about why he would come back to a franchise that he protested?
Not at all. It wasn't spoken of at all, at least to me. Now, remember, I'm just one actor I'm the co-star on the set, but I'm just one actor. No, and I didn't know that until years after that he had actually had a problem with the first movie.
Yeah.
You never would have known it. I mean, God rest his soul. I mean, he was an actor. He collected the paycheck.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And listen, he did a great job. Talk about honoring the work. He was amazing to work with. First of all, it was Mickey Rooney. And of course I knew who he was. He was one of my grandma's favorites. He's one of my favorites growing up, you know, watching the Andy Hardy stuff and all the stuff with Judy Garland. And he did talk about Judy Garland all the time. He'd just written that book, Life's Too Short. So so just all the time. But he signed a copy of the book for my grandma. He was wonderful to work with. Interestingly, he never learned his lines. Right before the scene, the script supervisor would give just the little scene we're about to shoot. He would look at it and go, "Okay, let's go." He had a photographic memory. And then he would nail it word for word. He would nail it. He didn't believe in over rehearsing. He thought film, unlike theater, film had to be kind of spontaneous. And I kind of agree with that. Like things happen in that initial moment. So you always shoot the rehearsal, right? And not that there wasn't a lot of preparation, for example, for me to play Pino. I think as a character. But he would just read the scene, put it down, and do it every single time. And I was like, oh my God. And then you think, well, he'd done 177 films by that point. So that is like just the way he did it. I have one really funny story I have to tell you about Mickey, though. And I know I don't know how much time we have. But
go for it.
You know, are we okay to tell this?
Yep.
I mean, he's dead, so I won't say anything. But they had to get a lot of insurance on him, obviously, right? If anything happened to him on set, huge liability, right? Oh, I have so many stories, but I gotta tell you this one. So he used to like, you know, mess with the crew and he thought it was hilarious. So the scene in the movie where he chases me down into the basement, right? And we have our big fight. That basement is actually built on the stage level. Yes. And there's a big catwalk about 30 feet up or 20 feet up. And we're waiting on the catwalk that's been built for us, and the stairs run down into the basement. So we're actually running down to stage level from a catwalk that's built in the studio. Yep. And it was a really rickety catwalk. And we did several takes, you know, and we're standing up there at one point side by side, and he goes, "Hey, watch this." And he starts tap dancing on the catwalk.
Oh no.
And the catwalk starts swaying like this. Right? and the assistant director, I'll never forget, the assistant director runs up. He's like, "Oh, Mr. Rooney, Mr. Rooney, if you wouldn't mind, please, sir, please." You know, so he knew, and he was really fun and had a funny sense of humor. He had just done like the David Letterman show or the Tonight Show or something like the night before. And one memory I have is he invited me into his trailer, and he and his manager and I sat there watching him on the Tonight Show from the night before, and he's like critiquing his performance. I was like, "Oh, I shouldn't have said that. Or I should have been funnier there," or whatever. And the manager's like, well, next time say this, and don't forget to say this and this. This is surreal, man.
Wow.
So
I found that quite amusing too, that Melsy, you've got Judy Garland on your mug.
I was just seeing myself in the reflection there.
wow.
Yeah.
How funny. It's serendipitous. Oh, that's a great mug, Mel. Oh, that's really
Meant
cool.
to be.
Oh, that's really
Very
cool.
Yeah.
It even changes color when there's hot liquid in there.
Oh, that's nice. Oh, no. So
I think it was
do
a Christmas present.
So
we all change color when there's hot liquid in there.
There's a horror movie in that. We'll brainstorm some ideas. But you do a lot of conventions these days, and in fact, you recently did Scarefest. I used to host the Scarefest podcast, and from Australia with them. So go figure.
How cool!
Yeah, but what I wanted to ask you, and you kind of answered this before, when you go to the conventions, who do you get recognized for the most?
Well, it's interesting because Pumpkinhead #1, I think the majority, like people can quote that movie, but also a fair amount of people for Silent Night 5. So it depends on the show. Like this last Scarefest, they had me sitting next to Lance Henriksen, so there was this big like, oh, it's a kind of a Pumpkinhead reunion because they've never done that. They still haven't done that.
Yeah,
and so people were really excited, like they had come to see both of us. Or they, were just excited that we were both there together. So Scarefest, far and away, I sold out of every Pumpkinhead picture I had, just about, and so that was really cool. But a lot of people came for Silent Night 5 too. And interestingly, there's always this small but growing group of people that come for Society. Yeah. And they're very, very rabid about it. Like they're really intensely focused on it. Like it's their favorite. Like they just love that movie. And so it depends on the show, because I did a show, a smaller show about a month before Scarefest. And that was by and large, like there were a lot of people there for Society and Silent Night 5. And just a few Pumpkinhead people. So it's weird. It just depends, I guess, on the show.
Can you imagine can you imagine a shunting cosplay? That'd be interesting.
Can you imagine?
Five people in the one costume.
Never again. From your lips to God's ears, man. Because I have one fun convention story about Brian Yuzna and the shunting and all that stuff.
Oh, please.
So we do the movie, and this was when I met Wes Craven. This is when I got to meet Wes Craven, and it was just a disaster. So Brian Yuzna said to me, we're going to go do this show down. It wasn't Comic-Con in San Diego, but it was something like that. It may have been Comic-Con. It was a big show. This was years ago. And he said, so we're going to have the butthead guy. Remember the father turns himself inside out?
Certainly do.
Little butthole. And I'm like, oh, awesome. He says, so we got the prosthetic, but the actor's not available. How about you do it? I'm like, oh my God, Brian, really? And of course, I'm like, okay, sure.
Career highlight right there.
Yeah. So I go down there, I sit in, and so basically I'm in the booth for Society with Brian Yuzna. Brian's there, and I'm on my knees. And the table is here, and my head is sticking through the butt thing, and I'm like, whoa, and I'm having to act like the butt guy. People are coming up and just like trying to shove stuff in my mouth, and
oh no,
it was awful. And then at one point, Brian goes, "Oh, hey, I want you to meet somebody." So the handlers get me up because I can't see, and they walk me over next door, and there's Clive Barker. Did I say Wes Craven? Clive Barker.
Yeah.
So it was not
Clive
Barker.
Clive Barker, far out.
And I'm like,
he was probably into that.
Yeah, I was about to say he's into the BDSM.
Not a bad audience for that.
Well, he didn't ask me out. That's all I can tell you.
I was about to say, you're lucky he didn't have a go.
So I'm like, oh my God, it's Clive Barker. And I'm going, and I have these prosthetic teeth in my mouth. I'm like, it's nice to meet you, Mr. Barker. That was my fun convention story.
Oh, it might be my favorite story ever told on the podcast. That's hilarious. Now, we're about out of time. Before I let you run, I just want to tell people to go and look up your IMDb page because you've got lots of credits to your name. I particularly love a movie you did called Permanent a few years ago. That was a great film.
You're my new best friend. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you for seeing Permanent. I love that movie. It's not a genre movie, obviously, right? But it's a really sweet family movie. It's funny.
It's great. It's really great. And it's not an easy one to come by down here, but if people want to find it, they will. But one question before we go, just because you're based in Atlanta, I want to know, like, is it hard these days to do auditions when you're so far away from where a lot of the action is?
No, actually, this is a great place to be for the film and television industry right now.
Yeah.
Our film incentives have made it a real production hub.
Gotcha.
And it's either last year or the year before, we were the #1 production hub. So there's plenty of opportunities here. My main focus now is voice acting, which you may know. Nick in the Walking Dead video game, and I got to be Mr. Peanut this year. And I found voice acting about 20 years ago, and I just absolutely fell in love with it. So I audition every single day, multiple times a day, and I book a fair amount of work.
Yeah.
And you really can live anywhere to be a voice actor. You don't have to necessarily live in Los Angeles. And then once in a while, a casting director will ask me to audition, and I never turn it down because my dad always said you have to walk through every door that opens and educate yourself about whatever you're doing and walk through every door that opens, whether it's for you or not, and you'll see if that opportunity was for you. So I end up doing an on-camera movie or a couple of movies a year, something like that. But now I have to honestly tell you, and this is a real thing. Someone asked me this the other day, and I had to really think about it, but now I get to meet the fans. And this is brand new for me. Honestly, I have only done 4 shows so far, and they've gotten increasingly big. I mean, and it's and it's so much fun and it's amazing. But meeting the fans makes me want to go back into on camera, specifically into the genre, and do something for them. Like, I want them to be able to have something to see me in, So I'm thinking about kind of digging back in and, redoubling my efforts and maybe getting back into the on-camera world. I don't know. I love voiceover, and it's really my thing.
We're producing lots of horror films down here at the moment. So if any directors, producers are watching and, looking for
me.
Exactly. So I think cheap. I think it's safe to say it's safe to say that you're probably top 3 favorite guests I've had on the show by far.
Glenn,
yeah, and that's alongside Brian Usner too. So good company to be.
Well, okay,
yeah. So what a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for your time, and I implore everybody out there to go and watch The Toymaker this year for Christmas because.
Thank you. Please do, everybody. Go watch it and get the new DVD set. Oh, and guys, I hope to get to Melbourne, seriously. Hopefully I'll get there for something, and I want to be able to meet you both and see you both and take you out for a bevy, okay?
Oh, without a doubt.
Appreciate you having me. We'll stay in touch, please, okay?
Sure. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care. Thank you so much.
Brian.
Welcome to the shop of Joe Petto. Here, you'll find the most amazing gadgets on Earth. Each toy is unique.
What a terrible accident. Sarah, you think this is an accident? Look.
Each specially designed by the craftsman himself.
Fuck, where did all these toys come from?
Sir, what do you know about that old guy from the toy store? I wonder if I told you he was arrested for maiming some kids several years ago.
What reason could he have to hurt innocent children?
Joe Petto always wanted a real boy.
Where's Derek? He took him.
Who took him? Where? Who?
The man from the toy store.
But he'll have to make what he can get.
All you need is a little of that, and a little of that, and a little of that.
From the producer of Bride of Reanimator.
I want my boy! What have you done with him? I'm your son now, not him.
With special effects by Screaming Mad George Inc. of Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4. Comes the most incredible night yet. Mickey Rooney stars in Silent Night, Deadly Night 5, The Toymaker.
Merry Christmas.